Convoy 7. The first one disappeared on a Wednesday. A federal prisoner being transported from a holding facility in New Mexico to a federal correctional institution in Texas never arrived. The convoy, a standard 2-vehicle transport, 3 deputies, 1 prisoner, filed a mechanical breakdown report at 3:47 p.m. and a secondary report 40 minutes later, indicating the prisoner had been transferred to a different vehicle for continuation of transport. The paperwork was filed correctly. The signatures were in the right places. The chain of custody log showed continuous supervision. By the time a receiving intake officer at the Texas facility noted that the prisoner had not arrived and was not in the system as delayed, it was the following morning. 18 hours had passed. The prisoner was a mid-level Sinaloa Cartel distributor who had been convicted on federal trafficking charges and was facing a 12-year sentence. He had no known escape history. He had no documented connections to organized escape networks. His attorney had filed no emergency motions. His family had made no unusual contact attempts. There was, on paper, no particular reason to treat his disappearance as anything other than a processing error, a clerical failure, a miscommunication between facilities. The Marshal's Service Office of Internal Investigations opened a preliminary inquiry on Friday. Standard protocol for a missing prisoner. Standard timeline. Standard paperwork. 3 weeks later, a second prisoner disappeared from a different convoy on a different route. The paperwork was again in order. The chain of custody again appeared continuous. The prisoner, another cartel-connected defendant awaiting sentencing on federal weapons charges, was simply not at the receiving facility when the transport was logged as complete. 2 disappearances, 2 convoys, 2 prisoners connected to the Sinaloa Cartel's distribution network in the American Southwest. 1 deputy marshal had been present at both transports. The Office of Internal Investigations elevated the inquiry to a full investigation at 8 a.m. on a Monday. The investigative lead pulled every transport manifest, chain of custody record, and personnel assignment log for both events within the first 2 hours. The pattern was not subtle once someone was looking for it. The deputy in question had been the senior supervising officer on both transports. He had filed both mechanical breakdown reports. He had authorized both prisoner transfer notations, and his personnel file showed that he had been assigned to 14 transports in the past 18 months, a workload that was slightly above average, but not unusual for his district assignment. The investigative lead ran the full 14 transport list against prisoner outcomes. 3 prisoners were unaccounted for. 3 federal prisoners, all Sinaloa connected, all transported under this deputy's supervision at some point in the chain, all with paperwork that documented continuous custody and all currently listed in federal records as having arrived at their designated facilities, and none of whom could be physically located in those facilities when investigators made direct contact with facility intake coordinators. 3 prisoners, 18 months, and a transport schedule that showed the deputy was assigned to another convoy in 72 hours. The investigation that followed was the most sensitive the Office of Internal Investigations had handled in 6 years, for a reason that went beyond the disappearances themselves. A deputy marshal with the authority and position to systematically vanish prisoners from federal transport was not working alone. The logistics of extracting a living person from a moving federal convoy, the coordination required, the handoff points, the reception on the other end, required infrastructure, which meant the cartel had not simply bribed a single officer. They had built a system around him, and that system was still operational. The deputy's financial records were pulled under emergency court authorization within the first 4 hours of the elevated investigation. What they showed was careful and patient. No large deposits, no wire transfers from flagged accounts, no single transaction that would have triggered automatic reporting thresholds. Instead, over 26 months, a pattern of cash contributions to a series of accounts, a personal savings account, a joint account with his wife, a home renovation loan that had been paid down at a rate inconsistent with his salary, that, when totaled and mapped against his transport assignment dates, showed payments averaging between $18,000 and $22,000 per transport. Per prisoner, the cartel was paying approximately $20,000. For a deputy marshal willing to make 3 federal prisoners disappear from custody, the Sinaloa Cartel had spent roughly $60,000 against the operational value of recovering 3 mid-level distribution network members before they could cooperate with federal investigators or begin serving sentences that would take them off the board for a decade or more. $60,000 was an exceptional return. The investigative lead brought the financial analysis to the Office of Internal Investigations Director at 11:30 a.m. Monday. The director read the summary document, looked up, and asked one question. Who else? It was the right question. A deputy marshal who had been running this operation for 18 months without detection had operational support. The cartel's logistics chain required at minimum a coordination point. Someone who arranged the handoff locations. Someone who received the prisoners on the other end. Someone who fed information about transport schedules and routes back to the cartel's planning apparatus. The deputy could not have done this without internal access to transport scheduling data. That data was accessible to a limited pool of Marshals service personnel. The investigation went dark at 12:15 p.m. Monday, meaning it was removed from the standard internal reporting system, its files transferred to a sealed access environment, and the number of personnel with knowledge of its existence reduced to 7 individuals. The director, the investigative lead, 3 senior investigators, the district commander, and 1 liaison with the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force, who had been tracking the cartel's distribution network from a different angle and whose files turned out to contain a reference, noted as background detail, to a suspected corruption vector in federal prisoner transport in the same geographic corridor. The FBI had seen a shadow of this and not pursued it. The Marshals were now pursuing it with 72 hours before the next convoy. The deputy marshal's next transport assignment was Thursday morning. A 2-vehicle convoy, 4 prisoners, route from Arizona to a federal facility in Nevada. One of the 4 prisoners was a Sinaloa Cartel logistics coordinator who had been arrested 8 months ago and whose cooperation with federal investigators had produced the most significant intelligence haul from the cartel's Arizona operations in 4 years. He was currently in protective custody at the Arizona holding facility. His identity as a cooperating witness known to a very limited number of people, and listed in the transport manifest that had been assembled using standard scheduling protocols as prisoner 4 of 4 on Thursday's convoy. When the investigative lead saw the manifest, she stopped moving for approximately 3 seconds. Then she picked up the phone and called the director. The cooperating witness was not a mid-level distributor. He was not a weapons defendant. He was the source of 4 years of operational intelligence, a man whose information had led to 11 indictments and whose testimony was scheduled for a proceeding in 6 months, that the cartel's legal defense team had been fighting with every procedural motion available. If the cartel knew he was on Thursday's convoy, and if the deputy's role in the operation was what the financial records suggested, the cooperating witness was not going to be quietly redirected to a cartel safe house. He was going to be killed. A clean disappearance from federal custody, paperwork in order, no physical evidence, and the cartel's most dangerous cooperating witness simply ceasing to exist. The investigation had a 72-hour window that had just become considerably more urgent. The manifest was not altered. The transport was not canceled. Both decisions were deliberate. If the deputy, or whoever was feeding scheduling information to the cartel, detected a sudden change in the Thursday convoy, the operation would go to ground. The cartel would pull back. The deputy would know the investigation was active. The next convoy would be cleaner, the coordination tighter, and the marshals would have lost their opportunity to identify the full network. While it was operational, the cooperating witness would be moved, quietly, without documentation that touched the standard scheduling system, to a location the deputy marshal and his contacts did not know about. A transport would run Thursday as scheduled. The deputy would be on it, under surveillance. The cartel's reception infrastructure, wherever the handoff was supposed to happen, would be there, waiting for a prisoner who was not coming. And the marshals would be there waiting for the cartel. The 72 hours were organized around 3 simultaneous work streams that could not know about each other, because every person who knew the investigation existed was a potential leak point. Workstream 1. Identify the scheduling leak. Someone inside the Marshal Service had access to transport manifests and was passing them to the cartel. The investigation team ran access logs for the transport scheduling system going back 26 months. Every login, every file access, every manifest pull, cross-referencing with the deputy's transport dates, produced a secondary pattern. A second user credential had accessed the manifest for each of the 3 disappeared prisoners' transports. Within 12 hours of the transport being finalized, the credential belonged to a transport coordination clerk in the district administrative office. The clerk was 29 years old, had been with the Marshals Service for 3 years, and had a brother currently serving a federal sentence at a facility in California for charges unrelated to cartel activity. The brother had received 2 visitor contacts in the past 18 months from individuals whose identification documents were later confirmed as fraudulent. The cartel had found a pressure point, a family member in federal custody, and had used it to recruit a low-level administrative employee who had access to exactly one thing of operational value: the scheduling system. The clerk was placed under covert surveillance at 4 p.m. Monday. Workstream 2. Identify the handoff infrastructure. The 3 previous disappearances had occurred on 3 different routes across 2 states. The mechanical breakdown reports filed by the deputy identified 3 different locations where the transports had allegedly stopped. Investigators conducted physical reconnaissance of all 3 locations on Monday afternoon. At the second location, a rest area on a state highway in southern New Mexico, they found evidence of recent vehicle traffic on an unpaved access road behind the facility. Tire track impressions consistent with a panel van or large SUV, and a discarded cell phone burner unit that forensic recovery subsequently showed had sent a single outgoing message approximately 90 minutes after the convoy in question had passed through the area. The message recipient was a number registered to a prepaid account purchased at a convenience store in Tucson 14 months ago. The number had been inactive since the message was sent, but the purchase transaction at the convenience store had been captured on the store's security camera. The image was low resolution, and the individual was wearing a hat. Facial recognition produced no match, but the timestamp of the purchase, cross-referenced with a DEA surveillance log from a Sinaloa network monitoring operation running at the time in the Tucson area, placed a known cartel logistics operative in the same part of the city within a 4-hour window. The cartel was using local logistics infrastructure, people and vehicles already in the network for product movement, to handle the prisoner transfers. That meant the Thursday handoff would not be a special operation. It would be a routine logistics activation, indistinguishable from the cartel's normal movement activity, until the moment of transfer. The DEA's Organized Crime Task Force was read into the investigation at 6 p.m. Tuesday, at the director's authorization, after the scheduling leak had been confirmed and contained by limiting the clerk's system access through a technical intervention that made the restriction appear to be a routine system maintenance event. The task force brought 12 months of operational surveillance data on the cartel's Arizona logistics network. Within 4 hours, they had identified 2 vehicles and 3 individuals who matched the operational profile for Thursday's handoff. Workstream 3. Protect the cooperating witness. This was the simplest and the most critical. At 2 a.m. Tuesday, a 3-deputy team moved the cooperating witness from the Arizona holding facility to a location not in any federal database, under a custody notation that was filed in a sealed access environment, visible only to the investigation's 7-person inner circle. The witness was told only that his transport date had changed for administrative reasons. He accepted this with the equanimity of a man who had been in protective custody for 8 months and had stopped expecting explanations. The Thursday manifest was adjusted in the scheduling system to show 4 prisoners, including his prisoner number, on the convoy as planned. The adjustment was visible to anyone with scheduling access. The clerk, whose system activities were being monitored in real time, accessed the manifest at 9:47 a.m. Tuesday and spent 14 seconds on it before navigating away. At 10:23 a.m. Tuesday, the cartel logistics coordinator in Tucson received a call on a monitored line. The call lasted 40 seconds. No words that activated cartel response protocols were spoken aloud. The communication was in a pattern of pauses and ambient sounds that DEA analysts had seen before in other monitored cartel coordination calls. The assessment was confirmation received, operation proceeding. The cartel was planning for a Thursday handoff that was going to produce nothing. The Marshals were planning for a Thursday operation that was going to produce everything. Thursday morning, 6:15 a.m., the convoy departed the Arizona facility on schedule. The deputy marshal was in his assigned position. Lead vehicle, front seat, supervising officer notation on the manifest. He gave no outward sign of anything abnormal. He ran the pre-departure checks correctly. He briefed the other deputies on the route with the calm of a 12-year officer who had run hundreds of transports. He did not know that 2 of the 3 other deputies on the convoy had been briefed on the investigation at 4 a.m. Thursday and were maintaining a surveillance posture without altering their behavior. He did not know that the fourth prisoner in the rear vehicle was a deputy marshal in civilian clothes who had been substituted for the cooperating witness at the facility's secure intake area before dawn. He did not know that 14 surveillance assets, a combination of Marshals, FBI, and DEA personnel, were positioned along the convoy route in vehicles that had been pre-positioned overnight. At 9:47 a.m., the convoy passed through a stretch of highway in southern Arizona where the route narrowed to 2 lanes due to construction. The deputy radioed a report of congestion and suggested a route deviation. Standard procedure, he had filed route deviation authority in his pre-departure paperwork, as supervising officers were permitted to do. The suggested deviation would take the convoy onto a state highway, heading southeast, away from the construction zone. The surveillance team had mapped every possible route deviation from the planned convoy path in the 24 hours prior. The southeastern state highway deviation was one of 4 possibilities. All 4 had surveillance coverage. The marshals acknowledged the deviation, and the convoy turned southeast. 11 minutes later, the lead vehicle reported a tire problem and pulled to the shoulder. The rear vehicle stopped behind it. The deputy exited the lead vehicle and walked to the rear to check on the prisoners. Per protocol, he stood at the rear vehicle's door for 40 seconds. He made a phone call, which he held briefly to his ear before pocketing it without speaking. The call lasted 3 seconds. It connected to the cartel logistics coordinator's monitored line. The DEA analyst monitoring that line typed a single word into the task force channel. Activated. 2 minutes and 40 seconds later, a panel van pulled off a dirt access road and stopped 50 meters from the convoy's position. 2 individuals exited the van. They walked toward the convoy. They were met by 8 federal agents who had been positioned in the brush on both sides of the highway access point for 4 hours. The 2 cartel logistics operatives were on the ground in under 60 seconds. The panel van driver, who attempted to reverse back onto the access road, found a DEA vehicle blocking the exit within 90 seconds of the initial takedown. The deputy marshal, standing at the rear of the convoy vehicle, turned at the sound of the operation and saw the investigative lead walking toward him from a surveillance vehicle that had been parked behind a rise in the terrain 200 meters back. He did not run. He looked at her badge, then at the handcuffs, then at the ground. He said, "How long have you known?" She said, "Long enough." He was in federal custody at 10:19 a.m. Thursday. The clerk was arrested at her workstation at the district administrative office at 10:21 a.m. by 2 investigators who had been waiting in the parking lot since 9 a.m. The cartel logistics coordinator in Tucson was taken by DEA at 10:34 a.m. The 2 operatives from the panel van were processed on site. 3 additional cartel personnel, identified through the task force's network mapping, were arrested in coordinated operations in Phoenix and Tucson by noon. The cooperating witness was informed of the operation's completion at 11 a.m. Thursday. He was told that his transport had been part of an investigation and that he was secure. He asked if the people who had been coming for him were in custody. He was told yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked when his rescheduled transport would be. The investigative lad told him soon. The 3 federal prisoners who had disappeared from transport were the subject of an immediate recovery effort, the investigation's closure, activated. All 3 had been moved across the border within days of their disappearances. The cartel's operation had run smoothly, precisely because the paperwork showed continuous custody throughout. No active fugitive warrants, no alerts, no flags in the system. 3 people who were supposed to be in federal prison were listed as being there. And no one had looked closely enough at the physical counts to catch the discrepancy. Recovery operations through bilateral coordination with Mexican federal authorities located 2 of the 3 within 40 days. The 3rd was identified in intelligence reporting, but not physically recovered within the operation's immediate scope. A federal fugitive warrant was issued. The case was transferred to the Marshal's International Fugitive Unit. The deputy marshal was charged on 14 counts, including conspiracy, accepting bribes from a criminal organization, obstruction of justice, and 3 counts of facilitating the escape of federal prisoners. The clerk was charged on 8 counts as a co-conspirator. The trial, when it came, was conducted under enhanced security protocols, managed by the Marshal's Judicial Security Division, the same division the deputy had served in for 12 years. The post-operation internal review examined how an officer with 12 years of service had run a cartel-funded prisoner release operation for 18 months without triggering internal detection. Its findings were direct. The standard chain of custody verification process relied on documentary confirmation, signatures, timestamps, system entries, without requiring physical verification of prisoner presence at receiving facilities. A prisoner could, in theory, be documented as having arrived without ever having physically arrived, provided the paperwork chain was maintained. The review recommended mandatory physical verification protocols, a facility officer's direct confirmation of in-person intake, as a condition of closed transport records. The recommendation was implemented as a service-wide policy change within 90 days. The cooperating witness completed his transport to a secure federal facility on a Friday morning, 6 days after the Thursday operation. 4 deputies on the convoy. No deviations, no mechanical issues. He was processed into intake at 2:47 p.m. and assigned to a protective custody unit. He testified in the federal proceeding 6 months later as scheduled. His information contributed to 7 convictions. The manifest for the convoy that transported him. 4 prisoners, standard documentation, chain of custody, log complete, was filed and archived in the standard system. It was indistinguishable from any of the hundreds of transport manifests filed that month across the district. This one, all 4 prisoners arrived.